colleges where your son would be interested. You go to them and there are counselors who really help you out to get your kid in.
Yeah.
Or at least they will guide you how to do that. I had a good experience of GSU, UG, and Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, there's tours that you should take.
And they will always say this is off the record, but they will always help you to get your kid.
And usually when you're scheduling campus tours, there are two types of sessions that you want to attend. One is usually called an information session, and that's where you just sit in a room and they're talking to you about admissions requirements and what you need to have in order to be competitive. And then the other is the campus tour, where you're actually walking around and they're showing you things. So it's two different things that you have to register.
Just take an appointment and go and talk to a counselor, because each child, generally they do have some basis for counseling, and they give you a lot of counselor to child. Yeah.
I would like to know, like, what's your suggestion and opinion about the integrated undergrad programs? Like if we pick some engineering or any other major, and they integrate with the business or any other faculty, and just integrate the program, and they are about to do 5 years, I guess. And how is it?
I'll tell you my opinion again.
Okay.
Because no, it's not research based, I'll tell you my opinion. One thing I've noticed is that, I mean, I don't need to elaborate on this, like the landscape for what's out there and for the kind of jobs that our children will plug into is changing really rapidly.
Okay.
Like even if you look at kids who are, let's say, starting high school now, and who are looking to do a pre-med major, right? By the time they finish their undergrad, finish med school, and are actually out there doing their residency, I mean, like the face of medicine would have changed. Because we're talking 8 years between now and then.
Okay.
So I think that interdisciplinary learning is really important. Like it isn't important to just know your trade. You need to know how your trade affects other industries and how you can really apply what you've learned in other industries. So if you find programs that really integrate multiple disciplines into it, I think that's huge. But what I would want to know is that you're not losing focus in any one area just because you're doing an integrated program. Like for example, if they were going to combine business and engineering, right?
Yeah.
I would want to know that if I'm going to do an integrated program, I want to get the best of both. I don't want you to skimp on the engineering just because you're adding business into it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
But that having been said, I think interdisciplinary learning is really important. I think the students who will succeed when they're out in the workforce going forward are the ones who are creative, who can make connections between disciplines,
Yeah.
and really talk about implementation of ideas. I'll give you a simple example. At Wheeler in the magnet program, we have something called internship and research, which our students do in 12th grade, right? It's the students have to work 100 hours at a site of their choosing, and they do college level research in conjunction with it. So I had a student I was talking to who was working at GTRI, the Georgia Tech Research Institute, and he was working in this lab where they were trying to build a robotic tail, like, built around like a dog's tail. So I'm sitting here listening to him. I'm like, why would you want to do that? Like, what is that all about? He's talking to me really excited about, yeah, we have the prototype built, we're trying to build this robotic tail, and I was like, okay. And then, so I finally, when he was done, I was like, look, you got to tell me. Like, I don't have a science brain. Tell me why you're looking to do this. And then he proceeds to tell me that they were looking to apply this model to spacecrafts, because there's a lot of debris out there in space, right? So spacecrafts were looking at attaching one of these robotic tails, which would essentially work the way a dog's tail works, because one of the functions of a dog's tail is to flick flies and get things off of it. So this tail, if attached to a spacecraft, would basically flick debris off and prevent damage to the spacecraft. I was like, oh, I did not know that. Okay, but that's the point I'm trying to make. Like, if you can make connections between life and even between disciplines, like that's really what's going to fuel your success going forward. So I love interdisciplinary programs. I think they're great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Off the topic, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Does a student require to take a subject or course related to his major which is going to take in college?
That's a good question. I'm going to say yes and no. I'll say yes only because if you're going to major in something, you kind of need to have a sense for what it's about, right? Some colleges, when you're applying, will require you to declare a major. Like they'll say, okay, what major are you applying to? some don't care, you can say I'm undeclared. I think yes, only to the extent that you have some sense for what you're getting into. That having been said, I think you should really explore when you're in high school. Like, try lots of different things. Because, you know, it's easy to say, okay, I'm really interested in this. But you don't know what that's going to translate to in a major, right? So I think, I would say yes, only so that you can understand, like, what does this major involve? What kind of classes am I going to be taking? Because if math is not your thing, you probably shouldn't be looking at engineering, you know? So it would be helpful to take some engineering classes to understand how much math is involved, what type of math is involved. Is that something you're really interested in? Medicine is a little bit different. One thing to keep in mind is that I think when you're applying from high school into an undergrad program, it isn't as crucial. But if you're looking to go into a graduate program, yes, what you take at the undergrad level does matter. So for you right now, I would say just spend your time exploring. You need to just try different things just so you can gauge and evaluate it for yourself and say, yeah, I like this, or no, I don't like this. Because if you end up hating science, then you know you're not going to major in anything science related, right? You might be a more liberal arts kind of student, where you're looking at maybe economics and social studies or history or something else. But in that sense, yes, it would help to try something. But I don't think what you take really dictates whether you get into a certain program or not. That having been said, the one thing you're going to realize is when it comes to college admissions, there's never a straight answer for anything. Because every college does something different, right? So for example, Georgia Tech will say, if you're coming to us for a CS major, computer science major, they're not looking for students who are coming into Georgia Tech to learn programming. They're looking for students who have already been coding on the side or have some kind of programming experience on the side before they come to Tech. But that depends on the school. Tech is, number 3 in the country now or something of that sort for computer science, so that's their stand. So there are some fields that, you know, it helps to have some experience. Computer science is one of them. But beyond that, not really. Yeah? Okay. I'm going to talk about scholarships really quickly. We talked about scholarships, and I told you that there are a lot of scholarships that you can find on colleges' websites. So scholarships really break down into 2 large categories. There are scholarships that the colleges will offer, and then there are what we call community scholarships. So community scholarships are anything that range from like $500 to $5,000 to $10,000, right? There is a scholarship for left-handed people. There are scholarships for curly-haired students. You think I'm being funny, I'm really not. I mean, I promise you, if you Google it, you'll find it. These scholarships are not big, like they're $500 here, $1,000 there, but there's a bunch of them. So what college scholarships you apply for is a function of what colleges you're going to apply to. If you're going to apply to the college, you should look at that scholarship page and see what you qualify for. Beyond that, there are a bunch of community scholarships for red-headed students, really for students who play video games. I'm not being flippant. I guarantee you there are scholarships out there. So where you find these community scholarships and these itty-bitty ones, you can certainly Google them, but there are some portals out there that you can definitely look at, like fastweb.com. Actually, Zinch does not exist anymore. It's now called Chegg, C-H-E-G-G. But these kind of portals will give you access to the scholarships. So the way it works is that you go in there, you set up your profile, you say, here's who I am, here are my skill sets, here's what I do, and it'll actually match you up with scholarships in the database, right? So there are lots of different ones out there. How many of you are familiar with the National Merit Scholarship Program? That's another topic we can do like a whole presentation. Yeah.
The PSAT.
PSAT, exactly. So for students who take the PSAT, the practice SAT, whatever you want to call it, in 11th grade, the PSAT taken in 11th grade is the qualifying test for the National Merit Scholarship Program. It's an extremely prestigious program. The top 2.5% of kids who take the PSAT nationally generally qualify for these scholarships, right? I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell. We can certainly do another presentation on this, but if you do really well on the PSAT, and when I say really well, like you've got to get, in Georgia, I would say upwards of a 1470, 1480, yeah? You could possibly qualify for scholarships. And the scholarships through National Merit come a few different ways. You can either get monetary scholarships through them, and they usually range from $2,000 to $2,500. Some are every year and they're renewable. But really the biggest chunk of money from National Merit comes from the colleges they partner with. So they partner with over 100 colleges, and these colleges will say that if you become a national merit semi-finalist or a finalist, we will give you anywhere from a full tuition to a full ride scholarship. So there's lots of money to be had there. And that process generally plays out over 2 years. You take the PSAT in October of 11th grade, and you find out usually by February or March of your senior year whether you've become a finalist. So that's a completely different thing. But this is generally where you will find scholarships. We talked about hope. I'm not going to go into that again. We talked about the FAFSA. And really, that's pretty much it. I mean, I know I went into a lot, but this was really just to give you an overview of what the process is like, and then we can talk about different things. But questions if anybody has them. Yes, sir.
See, actually, traditionally, if you see the Indian culture, okay, we actually appraise our student in the box style, where actually we enforce them. You have to go for the computers major or for the engineering major, or you have to opt the mathematics subject. Okay, and if you see all this, today actually I visited one of the school for his school. They have some clubs where actually they need to attend the early freshmanship program, and then parents can go and then you can select the clubs. Okay, I cannot see any Indian student actually hitting the club, talking about anything about thing. Even if I ask my son to go and talk with them, he's hesitating.
You're talking about clubs at high school.
Yeah, the clubs at high school. So sometimes I feel like, is that really that box culture appraising is helpful for them in a long career, even if they go for the good majors and then get a good degree? So
okay, so the short answer is absolutely. I think it's extremely important for students to get involved in clubs, and let me tell you why. Right? When colleges are looking at applicants, they're looking at applicants who present a strong transcript, which means you need to have the solid academics. But they're also looking for kids who are involved in whatever it is outside of the classroom. And here's why. If you go to any college campus, a campus is vibrant if the students are engaged in activities. A campus is never vibrant if the students are just staying in their dorms, going to class and going back. So everything that becomes the life and the lifeline of a campus really comes from extracurriculars, clubs again in college that students are engaged in, whether it's your Bollywood dance club, it doesn't matter what it is. But there's a certain life on campus because of that. When colleges are evaluating students, they're looking for somebody who will come into their college, who will be able to handle the rigor of the academics, but who's also going to get outside of the classroom and plug into everything that the college has to offer. Now, I'll tell you, if students don't make it a habit of engaging outside of the classroom in high school, they very rarely do it when they're in college. Right. Let me tell you how I think it absolutely factors into academics. If a child is not the kind of child to get out there or put themselves out there and have conversations with people, it doesn't matter what subject it's about. That child is not going to be the kind of child who will ask questions when they have to navigate their way through something that they don't know anything about, or if they're struggling to even raise their hand and say, hey, I need some help here, right? So whether it's from a college perspective, college admissions perspective, or even just from a life perspective, like I would want to know, like for my children, I want to know that when they leave me in another year and a half, I want to know that they can hold their own. Like I need to be able to throw them anywhere, and it doesn't matter whether they know the lay of the land or not, they need to be able to ask questions and get themselves out of any hole. Because God knows I'm not going to be there, right? And those kind of skills don't develop if a child doesn't engage in clubs and activities or extracurriculars. It doesn't matter what it is. It teaches students those valuable communication skills, the ability to advocate for themselves and to speak up when something's not working for them. And that kind of stuff doesn't come from what you learn in the classroom.
How as a parent actually you should take care, like it should be balanced, okay, and it should get all the skills that he's required for his future life, as well as balancing our traditional mindset.
So that's a tough one, because here's the thing, right? At the end of the day, any student that's applying to college will get evaluated within the context of their high school. So for example, here in East Cobb, like they're not going to compare a Pope student to a Walton student. They're not going to compare a Pope student to a Wheeler student. Because Wheeler's a different school, Walton's a different school, Lassiter's a different school. I mean, they all offer different classes. So they're really going to look at every high school context. So they're going to say, if a student has access to 26 APs, I want to know that that student took advantage of some of those APs, right? So how you can make that happen, I think the number one thing is that you need to know your child, which you do. Like you will always know what your child's strengths are, what your child's weaknesses are. If you know that your child is a really social being, like total social butterfly, loves to talk to people, hang out, then you might have to rope that in a little bit and say, look, okay, let's get you into these classes. I mean, up the rigor, like make sure the child is challenged but is not drowning at school. But you know, rope it in if you need to, because you know that if the child is out partying every night, they're not going to be sitting and studying for a test 3 days before the test, right? It's things like that. Similarly, if you know your child is quiet and they're not the kind to speak up for themselves, I would say as parents, it becomes our job to say, you know what? I know you're not going to raise your hand and ask a question if you're ever struggling. So you know what? I'm going to make you get a job at Chick-fil-A. Go stand at the counter, look at people in the eye and talk to them every day.
Yes.
You know, because you know those skills are important for your child. So I don't think there's a set answer, but I think, and I'll say this as a parent as well, if there's anything I could go back and redo as I was raising my children, I probably would have put them out of their comfort zone way more often than I did. I actually did the opposite. Like I took my cues from my children, right? So if my children thought they were interested in something, I encouraged them in that area. But now when I think about it, and of course, like having done this job for 6 years now, I think I should have done the opposite. They would have gravitated towards whatever they gravitated to, naturally, because they just had an interest in it. What I really should have done was push them to do the things that they fought me on. You know, if they said, I don't want to do this, it doesn't matter if they brought the roof down. I should have said, you know what, you're going to do it. You're going to do it for 8 weeks. I don't care whether you succeed or fail, you're going to get through it. Because you know that growth comes from stepping out of your comfort zone. If you really want your children to blossom, and if you really want them to really reach their full potential, they have to be willingly at some point, be willing to step out of their comfort zone. And I think you really don't need to overthink the high school side of things, the academics. I mean, you'll get a lot of guidance on that front. I think this is the one thing that I would encourage you to do as parents. Like definitely, and kids don't hate me for this, but it'll be better for you in the end. But really, I think growth really comes from stepping out of your comfort zone. They need to be able to do that.
One more thing. What about this volunteering work you speak like?
Yeah, I
So
think
how
colleges
do you-
value community service a lot. I have seen in my experience that kids who are even kind of middle of the road, like strong academics, not necessarily top 10, strong academics, but who have a ton of community service, they're the ones that actually get the scholarships. Because again, they're looking at it saying, okay, the academics are there. I know this kid can handle academics at a certain standard, but this is also the kind of child who will step out of the classroom and do other things. So that's why
So
they
like
community
if here
service.
he has to do it, like he was doing it in India. Like
Yeah.
We were part of our group and we were going around and
That's
like
great.
blood camps and many things.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he was always a part of that. So if here he has to, do
We
it.
can plug into different things here. I mean, I would start with your school. I'm sure there are a lot of
Okay.
community service
So
organizations.
we have to first get it.
Well, it doesn't have to be done there. I mean, they do like to see some amount of engagement
Okay.
within the school. But even if you're doing something with your community here, like, whatever community you're plugged into with your temple, doesn't matter what it is, that kind of stuff is good. They really like to see that. Yeah? Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, for a different question. Each school says that they actually go through each and every application and they generally use a holistic approach to evaluate.
Yeah.
So what I heard this time for early action, Georgia Tech got 26,000 plus applications. So do actually they mean when they say that they
They do.
go through?
They do. They actually go through multiple rounds.
So because a regular action, regular decisions will be much more than 26,000.
Yeah, I mean, they really do. It goes through a couple of committees
So they do it.
before. Yes, they do look at everything. Yeah, they're not skimming anything.
I was just wondering, it's not.
I mean, like, I'm sure they have a way of weeding out applicants that just aren't a fit. Like, if you're graduating with pre-calculus, I mean, you're never going to be able to hold your own at tech, right? So maybe they
First
said, yeah, like,
Yeah.
that's the first round. Let's get rid of everybody who just doesn't have. Like, if your SAT scores are in the 400s, that's not gonna happen. I mean, it's just not. So I'm sure there's a way of sifting out those
Yeah.
kids. But anybody that's valid, that like checks the boxes and meets the criteria, they are absolutely reading everything.
No, because sometimes you just wonder how come this person got in and how come this.
You know,
not?
I'll
And so
say-
then they say that
yeah.
we evaluate the.
No, I know they do, because anytime that I have picked up the phone and talked to my Georgia Tech rep, she will talk to me intelligently about students. You know, like she
So
talk
they
about,
know
yeah,
the
they
stuff.
absolutely know their applicants and they know who they are advocating for. So,
Oh,
no,
amazing.
absolutely. Yeah, I know. It's a lot of work. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, I just want to say, like, I'm going to tech in the fall, and like, they have like this admissions blog or whatever for like students who got in, and they have this one that's about like students who were deferred during early action and had to apply a regular decision, and it was like, they talked about specifically, they had around like, I think like 500 to 1,000 applicants they initially denied because they were like, that sort of stereotypical, like, applies to all the Ivy Leagues, you know, has like, whatever, over 4.0 GPA and all that, but they don't really have like, maybe they don't do a lot of extracurriculars, or they don't volunteer a lot, or they don't seem to have an interest in a lot of other things other than school. So they're not necessarily like just interested in like what you would think, like, oh, it's engineering, I have to take all these math and science classes and that's my life. Like, I don't know, I just think it should be more than that.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they miss a lot of good ones, you know, when
Yeah.
they just do that, but yeah.
So one question about the taking SAT is, what is the, like, my son is 11 already, have already taken the SAT 2 times. So this is going to impact, like, if we take third time SAT test, so that is going to make any difference if it didn't improve.
So you can take the SAT as many times as you want, right? I think if you're going to consider, if your son is going to consider taking it a third time, I would want to know that he's doing something different in terms of how he's prepping for it. If he's just going to study the same way, and if he's just, like, nothing has changed, then he's going to be frustrated because he's going to take it the third time, he's not going to see any gains. If your child can truly identify what they were weak at and can plug those holes and really study differently, then sure, take it a third time. 3 is actually kind of average for most students, taking it 3 times. Yeah. But you would want to see
But what
gains.
happens if the third time SAT score goes down, right? So, and that is
So
a big
actually,
risk of-
well, you know, it doesn't really matter because there are lots of schools that do what they call super scoring. So they will take the highest score from any subsection and they'll look across 3 administrations and say, okay, I'm going to look at math from this one, this was the best, I'm going to look at English from this one, and they'll come up with a composite score that way. So it doesn't hurt you, but I'll also say students should really take both the SAT and the ACT because they're very different tests and 98% of colleges will accept either or. So, you know, some kids might do better on the ACT than the SAT.
Also, you don't have to send all your scores to the
Yeah.
colleges, like you
I think
choose which
You
scores
can
to
hold
send.
back the
College will
scores,
get,
that's what
I
they do.
think, all this.
No,
College
no,
board
'cause you
sends
pay
everything.
Well, you can cancel scores if you want.
No, you pay to send which
Yeah, you
scores
need
you
to
want,
request.
it's not automatically sending all the scores.
But for schools that super score, it
Yeah, I
honestly
think
doesn't
there are
hurt
2
you.
ways of sending scores. One, at the time of giving exam, you can tick mark. I haven't,
Yeah.
but what I heard from my son, that you have to let the college board knows that this score should directly go to the college where you are interested in. And the second is you pay and then send the score.
Yeah.
So third time what generally kids do, they wait for the result, they pay, and then if the result is good.
Like
they
one
send.
advantage to doing it when you take the test is it's free, you don't have to pay.
Yeah.
But I would not
But
encourage
then
any
third
student
time
to
is
do that.
generally they just wait for the result.
You just wait to see, and also, you know, if you're taking it in 11th grade, you don't want to send your scores in them because there's no application accompanying that SAT score, so what is the point of
So
that?
what you lose is a bunch of dollars